Good evening, curious dreamer. Tonight, I invite you to snuggle up beside two hobbits who, together, possess the gift of turning ordinary nights into unforgettable adventures. I'm talking about Merry and Pippin, yes, them indeed, the most mischievous, creative, and delightfully clumsy hobbits in the Shire. And tonight, they're not wielding swords or fleeing from trolls, but baking a cake. Yes, a cake. But not just any cake, a cake that might hold an elvish touch, a scent of longing, and a very special kind of power. Just picture it, a midnight kitchen, lit only by moonlight and flickering lanterns, where Pippin, amidst unlikely ingredients and hazy memories of Lady Galadriel, decides it's time to craft the perfect dessert to summon sweet dreams. And who comes in to help, of course, is Merry, with his down-to-earth sense trying to anchor his friend's improvised magic. Between flour on the ceiling, tea as strong as a potion, and Eleanor blossoms that might be petals, or simply dust swept in from the wagon floor, something is born, somewhere between a spell, a laugh, and a poem. But the most beautiful part of this story isn't just in the cake, or the steam that writes verses in the air. It's in the in-betweens, in the silence that slows down time, in the dream that remembers what we've never lived, and in the shared laughter that rocks us to sleep. If you enjoy stories with touches of fantasy, tenderness, and that pinch of humor that warms the chest, then go ahead and pour yourself a cup of tea. Take this moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and share it with someone who deserves to fall asleep smiling tonight. Here, every click is a small step closer to your dream. And speaking of dreams, how many times, at the end of a long day, have you wished for something simple, sweet, and magical to lull you into rest? Sometimes, the body is tired, but the mind keeps chattering, lists, memories, desires. Well, tonight, Merry and Pippin will remind you of something you might have forgotten, that sleep can arrive with a smile, and that stories, the good ones, truly don't need to hurry. Let's travel together to the heart of the Shire, where the hills lie gently beneath the moonlight, and round windows cast a warm glow over earthy paths and the scent of baked apples. It was there, beneath a lazy moon rising between the trees, that Pippin took, also known as the most stubbornly creative of all hobbits, was facing a rather serious nighttime dilemma. He couldn't sleep. And for a hobbit, not being able to sleep was almost as serious as missing out on second breakfast. Lying in his bed, which creaked gently with each frustrated sigh, Pippin tossed and turned like a badly baked loaf. The sound of crickets seemed to have multiplied, the blankets felt warmer than usual, and his mind was full of fluttering ideas, like autumn leaves in a gust of wind. Maybe I drank too much, he muttered, scratching his forehead lazily. But then, an old memory, hazy like morning mist over the beechwood, rose in his mind. A soft voice, almost sung, had spoken words about flowers that brought calm, nights that sang, and the gentle glow of the moon over forgotten fields. He sat up suddenly. It was Lady Galadriel, he exclaimed to no one but his own mismatched socks. She said something about the moonflower, or was it a leaf? Or maybe, a biscuit? Inspired by this flicker of elvish wisdom, and ignoring the fact that his memory was, at best, selective, Pippin had a brilliant idea. A cake, he said, clapping his hands. A good night cake. Yes, of course. If elvish ingredients can bring peaceful dreams, then why not put them in a recipe? With sugar and a touch of poetry. He put on his loose white shirt, still crumpled from the day, and his favorite checkered shorts, which always seemed to carry biscuit crumbs in the pockets. Barefoot, as any respectable hobbit, he walked silently to the kitchen, where moonlight streamed through the round windows, illuminating ceramic jars, flour sacks, and wooden spoons. We'll need honey, of course, the honey from East Farthing, the stickiest and sleepiest there is. Milk, yes, the goat's milk from Tookborough, the one that hasn't turned to cheese yet. Ah, and moonflower. Or was it Eleanor flower? Well, 3 should do. While rummaging through shelves and cupboards, Pippin hummed an improvised melody, something between an elvish chant and a pie shop jingle. He found a handful of lembas, now hard as stone, and decided to crush them with a pestle, convinced they would make the perfect base for the flavor of dreams. He also found some chamomile tea, forgotten and strong like a witch's potion, smelling of sleep and nostalgia. That's when Merry, awakened by some hunch, or perhaps by an unusual smell of yeast and confused ideas, appeared at the kitchen door, rubbing his eyes and frowning. "Pippin, is that you? What are you doing in the middle of the night with a pestle, and is that honey spilled on the wall?" Pippin looked at him, his face glowing, eyes wide with excitement. "I'm making an enchanted cake, Merry. A good night cake. Inspired by elvish secrets and the deep words of Lady Galadriel." Merry walked in slowly, taking in the scene, flour on the ceiling, a wooden spoon dipped in a teapot, and Pippin dancing around a sticky bowl. "By the looks of it, you're the one enchanted. And before you use salt instead of sugar, again, let me help." And so began the most disastrously magical preparation ever seen in the kitchen at Took Hall. While Pippin added ingredients with his eyes closed to better channel the spirit of the night, Merry tried to keep logic alive, measuring portions and preventing the oven from being lit with an ancient scroll he'd rolled up like a torch. Soon came the night's most debated issue, the use of Eleanor flowers. Delicate, golden, dried, and quite mysterious, Pippin laid them out on the table as if they were jewels. "Are you sure those are flowers?" asked Merry. "They could be leaves, or even petals of something that fell on the wagon floor." "Galadriel wore them in her hair," said Pippin with conviction. "Or maybe they were just decorations, but if they calm the spirit, surely they can soothe the belly too." "Do you think it's better to add the flowers before or after the glaze?" asked Pippin, holding an Eleanor flower as if it were a magical feather. "Or do they only work if they're picked under the moonlight of a rainy Tuesday?" Merry sighed, though not without a smile. "Let's just mix it all in before the kitchen decides to run away. If everything goes wrong, at least we'll have a good story." The batter came to life between spoons and laughter. At one point, Pippin's favorite spoon mysteriously vanished and reappeared on the highest shelf, dripping something golden and cheerful. Merry, watching the batter shimmer, said quietly, "If only Sam were here, he'd know exactly what to do with this." Pippin nodded, suddenly more serious. Sam would understand. He'd know what's an ingredient and what's an intention. We're just trying to make a bit of magic out of what we remember." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but heavy with memory. The kind of silence that slows down time. The recipe, which until then had been just an invention in progress, began to appear spontaneously in the steam rising from the bowl, gentle letters dancing in the air, as if someone were dictating verses in a forgotten tongue. "Are you seeing this?" murmured Merry, eyes fixed on the steam. "It's the magic recipe," exclaimed Pippin, in awe. "It's writing itself. Or maybe it's just my handwriting from when I tried writing upside down." The oven was carefully warmed, and the batter poured with solemnity into the round tin, adorned with an ancient symbol that, according to Pippin, looked like a star, or maybe a wedge of cheese. When the cake went into the oven, silence settled, broken only by sighs and the soft crackling of the flame. There, under lamplight and the watchful gaze of bent pots, 2 hobbits sat side by side, covered in flour, smelling of tea, and full of smiles. "Pippin," said Merry, watching the batter rise like a slow-motion spell, "if this cake really works, what will you dream about?" Pippin thought for a moment, eyes gleaming. Maybe I'll dream of a river of honey, a cake boat, and a wizard who cooks with magic. Merry laughed, leaning back against the wall. Well, if we're going to sleep with magic, it might as well be sweet. The two hobbits laughed. Pippin raised an eyebrow and said cheerfully, if this works, we'll patent it. The Shire's goodnight cake, now with guaranteed effect in 30 minutes or less. If it doesn't, said Merry, at least we'll fall asleep laughing. They laughed, and the kitchen laughed with them. Or maybe it was the wind outside, whistling through the wooden cracks in a friendly tone. And so, as the scent began to fill the air, a blend of honey cake, damp woodland, and something mysterious, the night went on. And with it, the promise of dreams they didn't yet know they longed for. The cake rested inside the oven as if it were falling asleep before being tasted, wrapped in golden twilight that flickered with every crackle of the fire. The kitchen, once vibrant with movement and chatter, was now sinking into the hush of a party's end. Pippin, legs crossed on an old cushion, stared at the oven as if expecting not just a cake to emerge, but some kind of revelation. Merry, beside him, slowly stirred the tea in his mug, watching the gentle swirl of steam curling up and fading into the air. "Do you feel that?" asked Pippin, his voice lower now, almost reverent. "I smell the cake, if that's what you mean," replied Merry, though there was hesitation in his tone. "Not just that, it's like the kitchen has gotten deeper," said Pippin, searching for the words. "As if time had unbuckled its belt and curled up beside us." Merry looked around. Indeed, something was different. The shadows seemed softer, the lamplight more diffused, and even the furniture appeared to be breathing slowly, as if waiting for whatever was coming next. The scent of the cake wasn't simple. It shifted with each breath, at times sweet like fresh honey, at others earthy like old root, and sometimes with a distant hint of lavender and clear sky. It was an aroma that stirred the memory of things that had never happened, yet somehow left behind a feeling of longing. Pippin leaned his head against the wall and sighed. "Do you think the magic is really working? Or are we just very tired?" "Maybe both," answered Merry, yawning. "Whatever's in that recipe. I think it's rocking us to sleep. Have you noticed how the crickets slowed down? Or maybe we're the ones who've slowed," said Pippin, smiling with a drowsy gaze. Outside, the sky dressed itself in a deep blue, speckled with stars that seemed to blink more slowly. The night breeze slipped through the cracks, carrying a whisper that seemed to speak in a forgotten language, as if the Shire itself were murmuring lullabies. Pippin pulled a light blanket over his legs, and Merry blew out the lamp's flame with a gentle puff. The kitchen was now nearly in darkness, lit only by the amber glow seeping from the oven's slats. "Maybe we should sleep now," suggested Merry, lying down on a shaggy rug. "Before the cake ends up eating us instead." Pippin chuckled softly, his eyes already half closed. "Good idea. But if I wake up floating, I'm blaming you." The two hobbits settled down, not in beds, but where they were, as if the kitchen itself had turned into a cozy bedroom made of old wood, spice scent, and good memories. The scent of the cake, thicker now, seemed to have filled not only the house, but the air between thoughts. It was like an invisible blanket, heavy and soft, settling over their eyes, their hands, their bare feet. Their breaths began to synchronize, and slowly the room entered an almost magical rhythm, a pulse between dream and wakefulness. Then came the first strange symptom. Pippin, already half asleep, felt a gentle sinking, as if the floor beneath his cushion had turned into a bed of moss. He opened his eyes, but the kitchen looked the same. Still, everything had a different texture. Softer. Slower. The clink of a dropped spoon echoed like a distant bell. Merry turned on his side and mumbled something about talking gardens, though it wasn't clear if it was a comment or the start of a dream. His fingers stroked the edge of the rug as if it were the grass of an imaginary field. The oven flame flickered slightly, casting round shadows on the walls. For a moment, Pippin thought he saw the silhouette of a boat. A small boat floating in the steam escaping from the top of the oven. He blinked, but the image had already vanished. "Maybe that's it," he murmured, his voice barely a thread. And then, without fanfare, without farewell, sleep took them. A sleep light as breeze, deep as a well of clear water. A sleep where time doesn't matter, where the real world dissolves like sugar in tea, and the spirit walks through unknown fields as naturally as walking into the garden. The kitchen remained silent. The oven held its gentle glow. The scent of the cake was no longer noticed, it had become sensation. A warm feeling in the belly. A soft sound in the ears. A memory of something good yet to come. The night was only beginning. And the dreams were almost ready to be served. The two hobbits were sleeping deeply, lulled by the enchanted cake that still baked in the oven like a small sun warming the home. That was when the dreams began. First came hazy images, moving colors, shapes without names, melodies that felt like smiles. But soon, like leaves settling on still water, the dreams took form. Pippin was dreaming. In his dream, he floated. He wasn't flying like a bird, nor falling like a stone. He simply floated, peacefully, over a lake of crystal honey, in a small boat made entirely of white marshmallow, sweet and firm. The boat had delicate lace-like details of light caramel, and cotton candy sails that puffed with a breeze that smelled of burnt sugar. Guiding the boat was a curious figure, a wizard with a pointed hat and a floral apron, his beard tied in a ribbon and a wooden spoon tucked into his belt like a wand. He whistled a gentle tune while stirring an invisible pot with wide, serene gestures. "You arrived early, Peggrin," he said without turning around. His voice was deep and measured, with a warm trace of irony. Pippin adjusted himself in the boat, wide-eyed with wonder. "Gandalf?" "Depends on the recipe," replied the wizard, slowly turning. The eyes were the same, bright and wise, full of patience and mischief. "Today they call me chef." "Are you cooking dreams?" asked Pippin, looking around. The sky was a sweet lilac dusk, speckled with stars that pulsed like notes on a lullaby. "I'm merely adjusting the seasoning," said the wizard. "What you're feeling now is just the beginning." Pippin smiled, swinging his feet over the edge of the boat. "Feels like I'm inside a dessert." "That's because you are," replied Chefendorf, laughing. "But be careful not to bite it, the ground around here is made of sleeping words." And with a slow gesture, the wizard blew a handful of golden sugar over the lake. Gentle waves formed, and each one brought to the surface a forgotten memory of Pippin, an afternoon of laughter with Merry by the stream, the first time he tasted Sam's walnut cake, a night he stayed up just to hear the stars blink. "Why do these things show up here?" asked Pippin, touching the water with his fingertips. "Because true magic," said Gandalf, "isn't about spells. It's about remembering. And you, Peggrin Took, are full of sweet memories." Meanwhile, in another corner of the dream, Merry was walking with slow and steady steps through a garden that stretched as far as the eye could see. The flowers had small smiling faces, and each one seemed to whisper into the wind. He approached a bench covered in moss and, as he sat down, heard a voice say clearly, "Hey. Careful with my right side, it's feeling a bit sensitive today." Merry jumped, startled. He looked around, then at the bench. "You spoke?" "Not often," replied the bench. "Only when someone sits without care." "Sorry," said Merry, shifting slowly, unsure whether he should apologize or ask permission. Beside him, a little yellow flower turned subtly towards him. "Lovely morning, don't you think?" it said in a casual tone. Merry stared, eyes wide. "You talk too?" "Of course. Most of us here talk. You're just usually too distracted to notice." "Well, it's not exactly common for flowers to chat," he muttered, scratching his head. "Nor for hobbits to speak with benches," said the flower with a giggle. "Yet here we are." On the other side, a blue flower leaned in toward him. "You seem like the type who likes maps." "Maps?" Merry repeated, confused. "Yes, maps. Directions, meanings, paths to follow." "That's not a bad thing," he defended. "Of course not," replied the flower. "But only up to a point. Sometimes it's good to follow freely too." Merry huffed. "This is a dream, isn't it? I should be dreaming of something heroic. A battle. A dragon. A field of pies." "Oh, pies," exclaimed a nearby daisy. "I think you dream of what you really need." Merry sighed, looking up at the sky. "A talking garden, all that's missing now is for the ground to start singing." At that very moment, the ground let out a deep and melodic hum. Merry put a hand to his forehead. Of course it does." Despite the strangeness, there was something comforting about all that madness. The flowers spoke sweetly, the benches offered spontaneous advice, and even a cloud shaped like a rabbit winked at him before floating away. Merry began laughing to himself when he noticed a figure entering the garden with steps so light not even the ground dared breathe. Galadriel. She appeared like an ancient memory, with the serenity of one who has seen many dawns and the silence of one who never needs to announce their presence. The flowers bowed gently as she passed. She walked among the flowerbeds with a quiet grace until her eyes met Merry's. A faint smile played on her lips, and for a moment he forgot he was in a dream. She simply approached and spoke in a clear voice, made of breeze and moonlight. "Eleanor, flowers may blend into the batter, little hobbit, but they dissolve in the heart." Merry blinked. He was about to reply, but Galadriel was already turning away, her dress swirling like mist in the wind. She vanished among the trees with the same lightness with which she had come, like a breeze melting into the sky. He stood there, gazing at the space she had left behind. "Dissolve in the heart," he repeated softly, frowning. "Great. Now even the flowers come with cryptic instructions." The yellow flower beside him shook its petals as if laughing. "Better than a prescription label." Merry smiled, half incredulous, then let out one of those silly, light laughs, for the world can, indeed, be a little magical and a little strange too. And so the two hobbits kept sleeping. One in a marshmallow boat sailing through waters of memory. The other in a garden where flowers knew more about him than he did himself. The dreams had no urgency, no clear direction. They simply unfolded like enchanted scrolls, full of images the heart remembered before the mind. In the kitchen, the cake was still baking, but no one was awake to notice the soft glow escaping from the oven's edges. It was as if time itself were at rest, and the dreams, at last, had begun to tell their own stories. Dawn arrived slowly, as if it respected the sleep of those who dream sweetly. Light filtered through the round windows of the smile, tinting the kitchen with a shy golden glow, as if asking permission to enter. The night's shadows quietly withdrew, and the oven, now cold, held the cake fully baked, simple and modest in appearance, yet releasing a scent of a life already lived. Pippin was the first to open his eyes. He didn't wake startled or confused. He simply opened his eyes like someone returning from a faraway place, but one that feels familiar. He lay there for a moment, looking up at the wooden ceiling, feeling the light blanket over his legs, and still catching the scent of sugar and dried flowers in the air. He yawned, stretching slowly. "Marshmallow boat," he murmured, smiling to himself. Beside him, Merry was still asleep, face serene, one hand resting over his chest, as if guarding something invisible and precious. His lips moved slightly, as though still speaking to flowers. Pippin got up slowly, walking through the kitchen with bare feet and careful steps. He looked out the window. The sky was clear and bright, with clouds stretched like freshly washed sheets. The garden grass shimmered with dew, and the birdsong sounded more in tune that morning. Merry woke shortly after, with a soft sigh. He blinked a few times, confused, until he caught Pippin's eyes and smiled. "You too? Dreamed of impossible things?" Pippin finished. "I did." Merry sat up slowly, scratching his head. "I was in a garden. The flowers spoke. And they said things I needed to hear." "I was in a boat made of sweets," said Pippin, sitting beside his friend. "Guided by a wizard stirring an invisible pot. He said true magic lies in remembering." Merry stayed silent for a moment, then said, with a half smile, "I think this cake has more secrets than sugar." They got up together and went to the oven. The cake was still there, untouched, as if it knew its work was done. Its surface was golden and soft, and a shy thread of steam still rose from its center. The scent now was gentler, more real, yet it still carried something enchanted. "Should we taste it?" Pippin asked, reverently. "Just a slice," replied Merry. "So we know it wasn't all a dream." They cut a piece and placed it on two simple plates. They sat at the table, face to face, like in a ritual. The first bite was chewed slowly, with eyes closed. It was sweet. But not an ordinary kind of sweet. It was the kind of flavor that recalled the calmest afternoons, the most tender conversations, the smell of rain in the fields, the sound of a loved one's laughter. It felt, for a moment, like the two hobbits were tasting their own hearts, and they tasted like home. "This," Pippin began, unable to finish. "It's the best cake we've ever made," said Merry, simply. "Perhaps the only one." They chuckled softly, and then fell into silence. The kitchen wrapped them in the gentle warmth of a quiet morning. Outside, the Shire was waking, but inside, time still moved with slow steps. Merry stood and picked up a small wooden box, where they usually kept forgotten biscuits. Carefully, he placed a generous slice of cake inside. "You're saving it?" asked Pippin. "It's not wise to repeat magical recipes too often," said Merry. "But you never know when we might need it." Pippin nodded. "Right. You never know when the world might feel too big again." They stored the little box in the high cupboard, far at the back, among old tea jars and rolled-up maps. Then they sat in the garden, their backs against the sun-warmed wall. The flowers swayed gently, and the wind whispered stories only those fresh from dreams could understand. "Do you think it was real?" Pippin asked, eyes closed. "The dreams?" Merry smiled. "I think they were more real than many things we've lived." "And do you think the magic was in the elvish flowers, or in us?" Merry thought for a moment and then answered, his voice calm. "I think it was in everything. In the cake, in the flowers, and in the laughter." Pippin smiled. "Then maybe we should write down the recipe." "Maybe. But I think, deep down, it's already written where it matters." The sun climbed slowly, and the morning followed its gentle rhythm. Took Hall's kitchen wood, little by little, returned to its usual routine of pies and teas. And the two hobbits, sitting among flowers and smiles, felt ready to face the day. With less haste, more poetry, and the quiet certainty that, sometimes, what helps us sleep well is just knowing we can dream together. The day passed in the Shire the way the best days often do, unhurried, with birdsong drifting through the leaves, the occasional clink of a spoon against a teapot, and the soft footsteps of hobbits who smile more with their eyes than with words. At the Tuck Smile, everything seemed to have gone back to normal. Almost everything. Pippin was rearranging a bookshelf he swore had moved during the night. Merry was sketching something on a piece of paper, perhaps a layout of the kitchen, perhaps a map of dreams. Both of them were serene, as if echoes of a forgotten melody still lingered within. But there was something more in the air that day. A gentleness in their gestures, a new tenderness in their silences. As if a part of the dream had chosen to stay awake with them. The little box with the saved piece of cake rested in its spot among the tins of tea. In the afternoon, Pippin went out to gather apples, and Merry walked to the market to fetch honey. They went about their tasks without speaking much of the dream, as though too many words might scare away the magic still floating in the air. But when night returned, like an old friend knocking at the door with a blanket over his shoulders, the kitchen once again took on that warm, soft atmosphere, like a page waiting to be turned gently. After dinner, which was quiet and simple, Merry opened the window to let the cool air in. Outside, the sky was clear, and the stars looked particularly attentive that night. Pippin glanced at the box in the cupboard. "Should we?" "Just a sliver," Merry replied, already smiling. They took out the box with the care of those handling secrets. The cake, though kept since the night before, still seemed fresh. Its golden color, the soft aroma of flour and honey, and that faint aura of magic hovering around it. They split the last piece onto 2 small plates and sat on the rug near the oven, where a timid flame still flickered, as though missing something. The taste was the same. But there was something more, as if that last piece carried not only ingredients, but everything they had lived, the conversation before sleep, the impossible dreams, the muffled laughter. "It's odd," said Pippin, chewing slowly. "Feels like I'm already asleep." Merry nodded. "Or like waking up inside a dream." After the tea, they wrapped themselves in light blankets, without even considering their beds. The kitchen floor now felt as familiar as any pillow. The oven, the lamp, the warmed wood, everything was comfort. Everything was home. Pippin yawned, letting out a sound as soft as a whispering breeze. "Do you think others feel this too?" he asked. Merry answered with his eyes nearly closed. "I think so. It's just that each person has their own cake. Their own recipe for dreaming." Silence. The flame in the oven crackled softly, as though it didn't want to draw attention. Outside, the trees swayed with the wind, and the moon spread a pale and comforting light over the fields of the Shire. Pippin, already heavy with sleep, murmured, "Maybe we should bake another cake, tomorrow." "Maybe," Merry replied with a slight smile. "But only if you promise to use sugar this time." They chuckled, almost asleep, and the kitchen held their laughter like someone holding an old secret close. Once again, without ceremony, sleep embraced them. Like a story told all the way to the end. Like a warm blanket. Long before they realized they were drifting from wakefulness into dreaming, Pippin and Merry found themselves back in the Tuck kitchen, but it wasn't quite the same kitchen. It was an expanded version, as if someone had stretched each counter, doubled every shelf, and planted tables as tall as trees. The ceiling shimmered as if made of melted honey, and droplets of light cascaded down in gentle waterfalls. And the food, oh, the food! It filled every space, enormous pies with crusts so golden they seemed to reflect constellations, cheeses that glowed like painted moons, fruits saturated with glistening juices that dripped in slow, heavy drops. There were cupcakes that hummed soft notes, loaves of bread stacking themselves, juices rippling like tiny northern lights in crystal bowls. Everything looked fresh, miraculous, absolutely irresistible. Pippin and Merry, still in their light pajamas, were drawn in. Pippin reached for an entire pie filled with basil and honey, but as he bit into it, the piece floated upward like a balloon. He chased after it, grumbling and running in circles, while Merry tried to bite into a gleaming slice of cheese that rolled across the table like a drum. Each attempt to eat made the food slip away or leap, distant and playful. Their laughter echoed through the expanded kitchen. Pippin slipped while trying to catch a spoon that was singing, landing on a wheel of cheese that exploded in its own fits of giggles. Merry had to steady a towering glass cabinet while chasing after a loaf of bread that sang a cheerful tune. The mishaps were perfect. He grabbed a floating baguette and spun in the air for a second before landing on a rug that lit up the floor with delicate Eleanor petal patterns. "Pippin, that little cake," Merry pointed at a tiny pastry, bright as a shooting star, floating on its own. "Go for it, quick!" Pippin ran, reaching out. The pastry unfurled wings and flew in charming loops, kissing the air in spirals, like a jelly-flavored will-o'-the-wisp. Meanwhile, a jug of juice spun on its own, swirling like a dancing planet. With effort, they managed to grab small bites. Pippin nibbled the pastry, tasting an explosion of flavor, sweet, floral, and familiar. Merry sampled a corner of the glowing cheese, which brought back memories of laughter shared at Sam's table. Each flavor was fleeting. Once tasted, it fell to the floor in miniature, shattering like tiny crystals of light that changed color before vanishing. It was like sampling a handful of concentrated dreams. They laughed again, light-hearted, as the kitchen pulsed with gentle movement, tables, plates, and utensils floating as if the house had a life of its own. As they ate more, something began to shift. The kitchen's light softened. The textures moved from surreal back to familiar comfort. It was as if the dream knew they'd had enough. Then came the Eleanor petals, first a few, then many. They bloomed from the floor, the walls, even the jars, luminous, delicate, and fragrant flowers that spread like a living carpet beneath their feet. Pippin grabbed Merry's hand as a soft rain of petals covered them. "Do you feel that?" he asked, eyes already half closed. "It feels soft." Merry smiled, barely able to speak. "Like the warmth of a sweet memory." They sat on the petal-soft floor, exchanging quiet glances. The kitchen now felt small again, cozy, intimate. The utensils stilled, the lights dimmed, and the glow slowly faded, leaving behind only the gentle feeling of tenderness. Pippin rested his head on Merry's shoulder. "I think this feast fed me more joy than food." Merry tucked an invisible blanket over them both, as if he could feel the dream's warmth. "And it taught me that savoring life is sometimes about tasting little, but with the heart." The sound of their soft laughter faded into silence. The music of the kitchen evaporated, and the world around them grew light, gentle, more real with silence than with sound. They drifted off there, nestled in Eleanor petals and sweet memories. They slept with serene faces, relaxed bodies, as if the dream itself had decided to stay and cradle them. And little by little, everything faded into soft hues. Only the warm feeling of something well done, well lived, profoundly kind remained, and a sleep so deep it was already dreaming within a dream. Outside, the trees still sway lazily, cradled by the same breeze that whispered gentle tales in the tucked kitchen. The oven's flame, now extinguished, left behind a warmth that cannot be seen, but lingers still. Feel yourself inside that kitchen, now breathing calm. Let the invisible aroma of freshly baked cake and chamomile tea wrap around your senses. There is no rush. There are no duties. Only the distant murmur of a world slowing down, of a time that welcomes you. If your thoughts still resist, let them drift like the petals from that night. They don't need to go anywhere right now. Just let them exist and pass, like drifting clouds in a summer sky. Your body may relax more with each exhale, sinking into this imaginary blanket made of sweet memories and peace. And now, so close to sleep, allow that feeling to remain with you. Like the last slice of cake lovingly saved, to remind you that tenderness still exists, that dreams still visit, and that rest, when truly embraced, is a silent kind of magic. Good night, traveler. May your dreams smell of honey, echo with hobbit laughter, and carry the soft warmth of stories worth keeping.